The earthquake defied predictions. The tsunami caught coastal communities off guard. The nuclear accident went beyond what anyone had anticipated. 12 months ago, people in Japan faced unprecedented threats. Today, they pause to reflect on what happened and what they've learned. This is an NHK World special program, Lessons of March 11th, 1 year on. I'm Gino Tani in Tokyo. Thousands of earthquakes shake Japan every year. People are used to feeling them, but no one imagined what was building up 1 year ago. What happened at 2:46 p.m. on March 11th, 2011, and what followed changed everything. We'll show you what people living in Japan are doing to mark that moment. We'll hear how the disaster affected lives in the hardest-hit prefectures, Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima. People in cities and towns up and down the Pacific coast have stories to tell, stories of grief, fear, and hope. NHK World's Minori Takao is in Minami Sanriku. Minori, what are people there doing 1 year on?
Gene, we've already seen many people around town praying for those who are lost. The tsunami destroyed 60% of homes here in Minami Sanriku. What you're seeing behind me is the center of town. The waves left parts of houses, belongings of people scattered all over this area. Debris still awaits for incineration by the bay. Residents today are getting ready for a memorial service for those who died. You might be able to see the cars lined up trying to get to the venue. And we'll all be doing what people across Japan will do, observe a moment of silence in about 40 minutes. Gene.
All right, thanks, Minori. Workers elsewhere still have to deal with mountains of rubble. But the people who head into Fukushima Daiichi every day are tackling something far more volatile. What happened there dispelled the national myth of nuclear safety, and it prompted some in this country to take action. A crowd has gathered in Koriyama in Fukushima Prefecture in protest. NHK World's Catherine Kobayashi is there. Catherine, tell us, what are people up to?
Gene, over 10,000 people have gathered in this baseball stadium to protest the use of nuclear power. Fukushima Daiichi is about 70 kilometers from here. We spoke to many protesters earlier. One 59-year-old man told me he came to this rally for the children of the future. He says it's his generation's responsibility to phase out nuclear reactors. Now, I'll have more on what protesters have to say later on, and I'll have the story of how the accident drove one mother in this community to make a difference. Gene?
All right, Catherine, thanks. For many, those moments 1 year ago are never far away. What we're about to show may upset some viewers. Still, we think it's important to be reminded of the power of nature and to prepare for disasters that might come. This is what happened March 11th, 2011. At 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9 earthquake strikes off Japan's northeastern coast. The country's largest tremors on record. The earthquake triggered a tsunami. The waves started barreling into shore. They swelled to 10 meters high, more than 20 in some places. They hit shore in communities across northeastern Japan, and they kept going. The waves reached almost 40 meters in some areas. They smothered office buildings, homes, people. More than 15,000 died. More than 3,000 others are still listed as missing. The earthquake and tsunami knocked out power at the nuclear complex at Fukushima Daiichi. Cooling systems shut down, and 3 reactors went into meltdown. Hydrogen explosions released radioactive material across the region. Japan's Nuclear Safety Agency ranked the accident a 7, the highest rank on the international scale, and the worst since the explosion in 1986 at Chernobyl. Emergency workers signed up from around the world. Volunteers came by the thousands. Many of them helped with the cleanup. Environment Ministry officials estimate the debris amounted to more than 22 million tons. 1 year later, crews have buried or incinerated only 6% of the total. The wave swept an estimated 3 million tons out into the Pacific Ocean. Scientists say some debris may hit the U.S. West Coast by 2013. The Japanese are burdened with a long list of challenges: housing, jobs, and the multi-billion-dollar cost of reconstruction. Ministry of Health officials say at least 80% of the hospitals in the area were damaged. Some of them still limit the number of patients and kinds of treatment they can offer. In some places, roads and railways have not been rebuilt. Reconstruction agency officials say more than 340,000 people had to leave their homes. Those people now live in temporary housing or stay with their relatives, so there's a lot left undone. Let's go back to Minori Takao, who is in Minami Sanriku. Minori.
Yes, Jean. A year ago, people down there saw the tsunami coming. Many ran to higher ground, actually to where I'm standing right now. Some people made it to the school over there. Those who didn't make it quite that far, though, were clinging onto this fence right in front of me as they saw the waves engulf their town. The tsunami killed 524 of their neighbors. 273 others are still considered missing. Their families have moved through a range of emotion over the past year. NHK World's Daisuke Azuma has one father's story.
On a cold day in February, Shun Makino shows us where he once lived.
There was a bathroom here, and my son's house was over there.
A house that sheltered generations of his family. Now, just a foundation. But Makino lost much more on that day. His son, Noritaka, who was a town official in Minami Sanriku. The March 11 tsunami swamped Minami Sanriku. Noritaka was among the officials at the local government's disaster control center, helping with rescue operations. The water started to flood the 3-story building. The officials ran to the roof. But the tsunami swallowed the structure whole. It swept away Noritaka and about 30 others.
Noritaka was honest, sincere, and modest.
He could be called courageous as well. Noritaka wasn't even supposed to be at the disaster center. He'd be in the hills around Minami Sanriku, conducting the forest survey when the quake hit. He descended immediately and went straight to the disaster control center. He wanted to help any way he could.
He probably felt responsible as a town official, but I believe he shouldn't have run toward the tsunami.
Makino, along with other families, searched daily for any information on the whereabouts of the missing after March 11th. He gave up, but he still hoped police would find his son's body. However, days and months passed without any news. So, in February, Makino made the difficult decision to hold a funeral. He wanted to honor his son ahead of the first anniversary of his disappearance. Noritaka's wife put soil and letters written to him by his children into an urn in place of his ashes.
How depressing. To honor my son, I have to hold a funeral without his ashes. But if I don't, I feel my son cannot rest in peace.
And so, reluctantly, Makino said goodbye to his son. But he's still waiting for closure.
I am hoping DNA tests identify my son soon. I'm expecting that will happen. I cannot bear to think my son's body is lying somewhere, unattended.
Makino, like many others in the Northeast, will continue to do what they've done for months now. Wait, and perhaps reflect on all that they lost 1 year ago. Daisuke Azuma, NHK World, Minami Sanriku.
The government decided last June to issue death certificates even if relatives couldn't produce a body. That allowed families to receive insurance payouts. The families of most of the missing have now applied for certificates. However, in Minami Sanriku, about 15% still have not. Jean.
Minori, so it's obvious some families aren't giving up. What about authorities?
Well, police are still searching for the missing, of course. 60 officers here in Minami Sanriku carried out a 5-day mission that lasted into this month. However, they found nothing. That's how it's been since January. Police have yet to identify 458 bodies throughout the disaster-hit area, and they do hope that DNA testing will help. Jean.
Minori, let me ask you another question. What's day-to-day life like for survivors?
Well, obviously, it's been tough. Many families are living in temporary housing. In fact, on the school grounds here right next to me are about 83 of them. The tsunami also swept away many businesses as well. Some people say that the waves took out the heart of the community. And in fact, I followed some shop owners who are trying to get their community back. It doesn't look like much, but Hiroaki Miura's put in a lot of time, energy, and money into his new fish store.
I'm satisfied with having reached our first target.
Miura was the driving force behind this new temporary shopping area. His store and 29 others reopened for business last month after a tough year. Miura used to own 2 stores and 2 factories. The tsunami washed them away. The waves took his home, too. Thousands of people in Minami Sanriku lost their homes. Miura worried his town would fall apart. He felt citizens needed a place to go, a community hub. So he called on shop owners he knew to work together to build a new shopping area.
The opening of a single store alone will not attract customers. We wanted to create a new community, a place where people could pop in spontaneously.
20 shop owners couldn't raise enough money. They dropped out. Miura and the others asked for more than $1 million in help, but the central and prefectural governments rejected their application.
This is the final decision from both levels of government. It means they're rejecting us.
Are they telling us to give up?
Government officials told him a temporary facility would only end up being replaced by a permanent shopping area. Miura and the others faced a dilemma: quit or keep going. They decided to take out individual loans and push on.
In a sense, everybody was forced to make a commitment.
Construction crews started building in December. People and businesses from across Japan donated refrigerators, air conditioners, all kinds of equipment. Buildings that were destroyed by the tsunami still remain standing. But right next door is a new shopping arcade that opened at the end of February. Shop owners started moving in. clothing stores, a butcher, a florist, and a fish store. Miura is back in business.
Everyone is here shopping. They're gathering together. I hope the town can also take a new step forward.
This is what shop owners had hoped to create, a place for their community to come together.
The project will face a real test from now on. There is no retreat. We're determined to keep moving forward.
You know, having followed Hiroaki Miura through the year, I was overwhelmed by his determination to keep moving forward. And people across Northeast Japan share that determination. One issue, though, that they face is the shop owners have to return the prefabricated buildings they're borrowing within 5 years, and that means they have to build new land, permanent stores themselves within that time frame. So they're going to need a lot of help from administrations and the rest of us, in fact. Gene.
All right. Thanks, Minori. NHK World's Minori Takao. People in the Northeast have many obstacles in front of them. Thousands have lost their jobs. Factory workers, tour operators, shopkeepers. But most of the losses come from the backbone of many communities, the fishing industry. The people at Japan's fisheries agency said the tsunami destroyed about 300 ports and it damaged more than 28,000 boats. The disaster all but erased the infrastructure to catch, process, and transport seafood. The estimated damage, more than $15 billion. The government has invested $10 billion to try to revive the industry. Steel catches in major ports are only half of what they were a year ago. Those who used to work in the fishery and others who live alongside them can't figure out what to do next. Some feel they need to move on to something new in order to make ends meet. NHK World's Yuri Ito reports.
Masatsugu Suenaga is looking for a job in what he's always done. At 56 years old, he's worked in fish processing nearly all his life. The tsunami wiped out the plant where he worked. He says the job always gave him a strong sense of purpose.
I think I really liked what I was doing and looked forward to work every day. Each morning I would wonder what kind of task was waiting for me.
Ishinomaki was Japan's third largest fishing port. People in 200 different businesses either caught, processed, or transported seafood. The tsunami washed most of that away. Suenaga has returned over and again to this employment center, but the only job postings he sees are temporary, in construction.
The way things are, I probably won't be able to do anything for a while.
Suenaga and his wife sat down 9 months after the disaster to discuss their options. They decided they should pick up and start fresh somewhere else. They'll leave Ishinomaki this spring when his unemployment benefits expire.
I have lived my whole life in Ishinomaki and never been outside. The idea of moving makes me worried. I cannot imagine what our future will be like.
It is a big dilemma for me. Even if I stay here, I can't make use of my decades of experience. But even if I move somewhere else, I may have to take up a different profession.
People who are self-employed are struggling too. They don't qualify for unemployment benefits. Yasuo Yonea ran a hair salon out of this building along with her 2 employees. She had the building reconstructed a year and a half ago, just before the disaster.
I lost everything.
She used to live here too with her 6-year-old son. She was left with a loan of about $180,000. She had planned to repay it over 25 years. Yonea lost her income. She wanted to rebuild, but if she took out another loan, her monthly payments would double to about $2,000. Yonia made some phone calls to see if she could get any help.
The building where I lived and worked was completely destroyed. I'm left with a debt of 15 million yen.
She was referred to another office. People there said they couldn't help her with her problem. Still, she learned the Japanese government was working on a program to assist people with a double burden of debt. The application procedure would take a long time. She couldn't wait. She needed help right away. She took the new loan and bought a piece of land far from the ocean, where she'll live and set up shop.
I am just taking a big risk. Because if I don't do anything, nothing will happen.
Still, Yonia is anxious about whether she'll be able to meet her loan obligations. A double burden after a year full of them. Yuri Ito, NHK World.
Many survivors share those anxieties. A government survey suggests about 40% of them have difficulty sleeping. And the percentage who say they're depressed is higher than the national average. Some survivors feel compelled to help others. NHK World's Yuko Fukuyama has that story.
Seiki Kinno outrun the waves when they swelled over Ofunato. Many friends and neighbors weren't as fortunate. He's determined to help those who survived. Kinno delivers packaged meals to those in need 3 times a week. The average age of the people he visits, 75.
I feel that we have to do something for them. After all, we are from the same town. I would be happy if I can cheer up grandpas and grandmas from my hometown.
On this day, Kinno visited a woman whose home was washed away by the tsunami. Mitsuo Sato lives in housing complex provided by the city. Sato struggles to do the things most people do every day. She's 87, almost completely blind.
I'm embarrassed to say this, but I cannot even take a bath without someone's help.
Sato lost most of her family in the tsunami, so she stays inside all day without speaking to anyone.
Sometimes I feel I'm about to go crazy. Why is it that I have to live like this at such an advanced age? I'm really sad.
Kinno and 6 friends visit 120 people during their rounds. Most of those people live alone. Doctors say they're seeing more and more elderly people. Psychiatrists are too. Over the past year, 5 elderly survivors in Iwate Prefecture have died in temporary housing alone.
We're a small group, so there's limits to what we can do. Still, we're determined not to let any of the people we're looking after pass away alone.
Kinno says men are particularly vulnerable. Many have trouble making new friends. Many have difficulty expressing what they feel. Many are too proud to ask for help. Michihiko Matsuura is 72. He also lost his home in the disaster. He says he doesn't feel like doing anything, so he stays in his room and eats alone. He doesn't even have gas to keep it warm.
I have tons of problems here, but I guess this is only expected.
They lost confidence in themselves after losing their jobs because of the tsunami, for example. So they shut themselves up in their homes. I want to do something about it, but I'm not able to make a difference. I feel a bit frustrated.
Kinno hears of more and more people every week who need his help. But fewer and fewer volunteers have the time. And Kinno doesn't know how long they can go on. Yuko Fukuyama, NHK World, Ofunato.
The group faces a challenge faced by many in the region, a shortage of funds. Masami Kikuchi is in charge of fundraising for the group. She joins us now. We'll be speaking in Japanese. We'll provide simultaneous translation. Kikuchi-san,
Ms. Kikuchi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. We've heard the number of volunteers is on the decline. What is the situation on the ground?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank people in the world and Japan for their support. In the past 12 months, we were able to deliver a total of 190,000 packaged meals. We're grateful for your support. Well, now that 1 year has passed, many people may think that there are no more needs for volunteers. However, there are much needs here. So I do hope that more people will come. But it seems that the people are reluctant, so we do hope that they will continue to come. At the end of this month, free toll road service and lodging will no longer be available. So we are afraid that less people would be coming to help. It takes 3 hours for some of our staff to come to our office, and because of the small number of people, we're reaching the limit.
Well, it must be hard to give personalized support to the disaster survivors with different needs. What do you think is necessary to make your work sustainable?
I think our commitment isn't enough. It's going to take decades for us to rebuild, so we need financial resources. We operate 3 delivery trucks, and so we have to pay for the gasoline, for the 50 kilometers to make rounds, and also fuel cost. And there are some elderly people who have to drive 15 kilometers just to reach the supermarket, and others who lost their cars have to wait for infrequent bus services. They're really having a hard time. Without help and donation, we will not be able to sustain our activities. So please don't forget us. Please don't forget the affected areas and continue your support.
Kikuchi-san, どうもありがとうございました. Thank you. That was Masami Kikuchi. People who live near nuclear plants have their own worries. Many of those worries were confirmed when the Reactor 1 building at Fukushima Daiichi exploded. The crisis there revived the debate here and elsewhere over nuclear power, and it pushed people across the country to protest. Let's go back to Catherine Kobayashi. She's at a rally in Koriyama. Catherine.
Jean, as I mentioned, over 10,000 people have packed into this baseball stadium. The rally started about 2 hours ago. Earlier, we heard a poetry reading by one participant. The poem was written by a resident of Fukushima. It was about the determination of the people to continue living here in Fukushima, even though the land is contaminated by radiation. As you know, Jean, protests in Japan weren't common before the nuclear disaster, but now we're seeing many rallies like this. Nuclear safety has galvanized public opinion. Many people in Koriyama and in other places are standing up and shouting out. I met one resident who says she hadn't given nuclear power a second thought until 1 year ago.
Before the nuclear accident, Tokiko Noguchi was busy raising her children, her 12-year-old daughter and her 6-year-old son. They've spent most of their lives in Koriyama.
I'm embarrassed to say I didn't even know there was a nuclear power plant in Fukushima before the accident.
What happened on March 11th and the weeks that followed changed Noguchi significantly. Like thousands of parents across Japan, she was afraid of what radiation might do to her children. Her fears prompted her to act.
I was scared. I wanted to get accurate information in order to protect my kids.
She met with other parents in her town and formed a citizens group last June. They now have 30 members. The group's first project was to make sure their children's school lunches are safe. They convinced their local government to install radiation detection devices at 2 centers where the food is made.
I learned nothing will change unless people speak up to the local government.
Noguchi and her group are continuing to speak up. They're using a website to attract new members. Noguchi designed it, even though before March 11, her computer skills were limited. It's all part of Noguchi's transformation. She participated in her first rally last September. Tens of thousands of people gathered in Tokyo, calling for the government to phase out nuclear power. Noguchi is committed to staying involved for the sake of her children. She regrets not paying attention to politics and nuclear issues before March 11.
Ignorance. That's what led to the construction of nuclear plants. I realized it's wrong to be ignorant, and I'm guilty of having been ignorant.
Tokiko Noguchi is here with me now. Noguchi-san,
many people turned up at the rally today. What's your impression?
It's very encouraging to see so many people with same thoughts gather here in Koriyama. For the future of our children, we don't need nuclear power plants that emit hazardous radiation. I believe this message would move Japan to change its course.
But without nuclear power plants, aren't you concerned about securing electricity?
Here in Koriyama, there are 33 wind power generators. If people all over Japan share wisdom, I believe we can replace nuclear power by renewable sources of energy.
Thank you very much. Jean, what's happening here is happening across the country. Protesters have turned out in many cities and towns, including Osaka, Hiroshima, and Tokyo. Jean?
All right. Thank you, Catherine. An NHK helicopter flew over. Latest shots of this plant that's attracted attention from around the world. More than 3,000 people head inside every day. They're doing their best to undo the damage. The plant's operators already had their hands full that day. After an earthquake, then a tsunami, things were about to get worse. The tremors toppled power lines. Then the waves knocked backup generators. That left the plant in a blackout. Cooling systems failed. The cores of 3 reactors started heating up. Then they melted down. Pools storing spent fuel rods started to evaporate. 3 reactor buildings blew up in hydrogen explosions. Firefighters and members of Japan's self-defense forces injected thousands of liters of seawater into the reactors to try to cool them. But they couldn't stop what was going on inside. Finally, 9 months after the accident, the Japanese government announced that workers had brought the plant under control. The operator, Tokyo Electric Power Company, says crews are still struggling in that effort. They depend on a makeshift system to cool the reactors. Workers report that pipes have ruptured and radioactive water has leaked out. The water used to cool things down is filling 1,000 storage tanks one by one. The people at TEPCO say all those tanks will be filled up by this fall. The explosions and the meltdowns damaged many of the systems operators would have used to monitor the plant. So officials at TEPCO don't really know what's going on inside. That complicates the job of keeping reactors stable and removing the fuel inside. Japanese government officials say it will take up to 40 years to decommission the plant. Those hydrogen explosions we talked about shot radioactive substances into the air. The radiation started spreading. The government ordered 88,000 residents around the plant to evacuate. Many fled without knowing when or even if they would be able to return home. NHK World's Hiroki Yajima has one family's story.
Nobue Yamada and her family spend these days far from home. She, her husband Hirofumi, his father and their 2 children rent an apartment in Iwaki City. She and her husband landed jobs.
I'm just hanging on here. I don't know what my future will be.
Yamada lived in Tomioka town for 16 years. Her home is 7 kilometers from the plant. Then on March 11th, everything changed. She and her family jumped in the car the day after and left the town.
I believed that the nuclear plant was 100% safe. I'm so confused and cannot resolve my feelings.
Yamada became concerned that her daughter Yuka might have suffered internal exposure. A checkup revealed she was safe. Still, Yuka had trouble adjusting to her new environment. She didn't know her new neighbors. It took 6 months for her to feel she fit in. Yamada was allowed to visit her home last month, if only for a few hours.
I don't want to take her to her home, but still she wants to go. I'll videotape it instead.
Give me the chance to go back once.
I want to figure out how I feel, then bring our things back here, and all the good memories that go along with them.
Yamada videotaped her home. She wanted to show her children what had become of it. Yamada and her husband were stunned by what they found when they opened their door. The floors were littered with their belongings. Some kind of animal had scratched the floors. Dust covered everything. But their old piano was exactly as it was. Their children used to spend hours practicing. Local government officials checked the piano for radiation. Then Yamada brought it back to their apartment. Then she showed them what had become of their old place.
行きたいか行きたくないかって言ったらどっち？夫婦。こうやって見ればもう OK？ もういいの？お年を召した方は早く帰って。
Elderly people say they want to return soon. But for me, considering the children's health and our jobs, I cannot even imagine going home.
The Japanese government hopes its decontamination work will encourage evacuees to return home. But many, like the Yamadas, say what they had is gone. They want to start again somewhere else. Hiroki Yajima, NHK World.
Japanese government officials have drawn up a 2-year plan to decontaminate evacuation zones and allow people to return. But the disaster left pockets of high radiation even outside those zones. Science Ministry researchers drew a map of how radiation spread. The red, yellow, and green areas are areas of high radiation. Wind and rain carried the substances beyond the evacuation zone, mainly toward the northwest. Government leaders say towns outside the lines on the whole are safe and do not need to be evacuated. Many residents have decided to leave anyway. NHK World's Susumu Kojima has that story.
Toshie Kamata now knows more about radiation than she could have ever imagined. She reads everything she can. She worries about how what she can't see will affect her children's health. She has 2 daughters and a 6-year-old son. The number of children at his kindergarten has dropped to a quarter of what it was before the disaster.
They're at the age when they need friends and to spend time outside. They lost both in the past year.
The Watari district of Fukushima City is located 60 kilometers from the nuclear plant. Government officials say the city is safe. Still, workers began to decontaminate it last month. They hope to clean up all 6,700 homes by the end of the year. Residents have measured some locations that suggest an annual exposure of more than 20 millisieverts. Government officials say levels above that are unsafe and require that people evacuate. Kamata checked her home last November. The children's room had 3 times the radiation as a local school, and government workers decontaminated the school.
It was the highest in the house.
So the children stopped using their room. Kamata started to think that leaving town was their only option. Her husband, Tatsuhiko, is a doctor. He didn't agree. His colleague specializes in radiation and said there was nothing to worry about. Her children didn't want to leave either.
It is our job as parents to protect our children. I don't want us to have regrets in the future.
Finally, they agreed that Toshie and her children would leave next month without Tatsuhiko. They are headed to Hokkaido, far from the evacuation zone, for a year.
It is said the cleaning doesn't do much, so I'm worried about what will happen next year. Will they really come back here?
The government maintains there's no reason to leave, so there's little support for those who want to. Kamata searched for a home and schools in Hokkaido on her own.
It would be so much easier if the government would just say that Watari is definitely contaminated and we should all leave.
Kamata knows that's not going to happen, so she holds on to hope that after 1 more year, her town will be safe. Susumu Kojima, NHK World, Fukushima City.
Fukushima Daiichi sits on the coast like all nuclear reactors in this country. The explosion spewed radioactive substances into the Pacific. Then the plant's operator released about 10,000 tons of low-level radioactive water into the ocean. The spread of radiation didn't stop there. Researchers say the substances have accumulated on the ocean floor. In some places, the currents have pushed the radiation to gather into hotspots. The researchers discovered some fish are contaminated with high levels of radioactive substances. Rockfish and greenlings both feed on small creatures on the seabed. Fukushima is close to one of the largest fishing grounds in the Pacific Ocean, but crews have stopped fishing in those waters. Researchers say it's difficult to predict the extent of the contamination underwater or how long it will last. Japan was the world's 3rd largest generator of nuclear energy. Only the U.S. and France generated more. Nuclear power supplied about 1/3 of Japan's energy. And government leaders were hoping to increase that to more than half until the accident at Fukushima. The crisis prompted the government to order tougher safety tests on reactors idled for regular inspection. Utilities have shut down 52 of 54 reactors. The last one will go offline by May. Many consumers fear there won't be enough electricity this summer when they need it most. Japanese government leaders will make the final decision on whether to restart the reactors, but it may be tough to convince their counterparts in the municipalities where the reactors are located. Local politicians say they can't be sure the reactors are safe, and they know many residents feel the same way. Government leaders are expected to decide on their new energy policy by this summer. What happened here in Japan reignited the debate over nuclear power and the passions of protesters. We heard from them a little earlier. Those who support nuclear power say it's efficient and emits no greenhouse gases. Countries around the world are considering it as part of their energy mix. New plants are going up in emerging economies, but governments in some nations, particularly in Europe, looked at Fukushima as a warning. Last year, Germany, Italy, and Belgium reviewed their energy policy. All of them decided to ban nuclear power. It's now almost 2:46 p.m. in Japan, the time when the earthquake struck 1 year ago. People across the country are about to hold a moment of silence. Emperor Akihito and Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda are attending a memorial service here in Tokyo. Let's go live now to the National Theater.
Mokuto.
Communities in northeast Japan spent the last minute doing the same thing, taking time to remember. People there marked the moment in different ways, however. Let's go back to Minori Takao and Minami Sanriku to find out what happened there. Minori.
Yes, Jean. A siren wailed through Minami Sanriku exactly at 2:46 p.m. On this hill where I'm standing, we saw many people praying, putting their hands together, looking towards the ocean. The tsunami had left many people victim in this town. And today, the temperature is much warmer than it was last year. There's no snow like it was on March 11th last year, but one survivor said that the sun today gives her hope that the future will be brighter for everyone across the disaster-hit areas. People here are determined to make a better future now that 1 year has passed. Jean.
All right, thanks, Minori. Minori Takao joining us. They're live from Minami Sanriku in Miyagi Prefecture. Catherine Kobayashi at an event in Koriyama. Catherine, how did people there mark the moment?
Jean, people are packed into this stadium by the thousands. They were fortunate to get some sunshine today, but certainly they reflected on what they've lost: jobs, homes, friends, family. Nearly everyone has lost some peace of mind. They gathered here today to send a strong message to the government about the dangers of nuclear power. Soon they'll be marching through the streets of Koriyama to share their message and to draw more people to their cause. Jean?
All right, thanks, Catherine. Catherine Kobayashi reporting from Koriyama in Fukushima Prefecture. What happened 1 year ago changed so much here in Japan. We spent the past hour and the past year reporting on the people who've experienced these changes and what they've learned. These are the lessons of March 11th, 1 year on. For most people in Japan, March 11 will stay with them. We'll continue to share their struggles and their successes here on NHK World. And we hope you'll stay with us. I'm Gene Otani in Tokyo. Thanks for watching.